In the Holy Gospel today, Jesus encounters a man who has leprosy. And it says that the man with the disease of leprosy, he fell prostrate and pleaded with Jesus, "Lord, if you wish, you can make me clean." All of you are familiar with the disease of leprosy. It's not very common anymore. It is a disease which eats away your flesh, beginning with your extremities. It would eat away your fingers, your toes, your ears, your lips, your face. It is a disfiguring disease, and back then, the doctors were not able to help the people who had the disease at all. What they did with the people who had leprosy was to segregate them from healthy society, and it was permitted by the law of Moses. If a person with leprosy got too close to a healthy population, it was permitted to stone the person or persons. Individuals with leprosy had to shout whenever they saw people who were healthy. They had to shout, "Unclean, unclean." Their clothes had to be ripped. Their hair had to be messed up. If they had a beard, they had to mess it up in order so that people who were healthy would see them and wouldn't come too close. You can understand that because you wouldn't want a contagious disease to be spread to healthy people. All of you have seen probably in movies, it was much more common many years ago, but probably you have seen in movies, that when people had leprosy, what they would do is in its advanced stages, after it had eaten away their fingers and their toes and parts of their faces, what they would do is they would take a cloth and they would wrap a cloth like so around their hands like that. And they would do the same around their feet. And sometimes what they would do is they would take a cloth and they would put a cloth in front of their face so that people couldn't see how their face had been disfigured by the disease. It's interesting to think, just for a minute, if you had a person who has this leprosy and the person falls down prostrate in front of Christ and says, "Lord, if you wish, you can make me clean." And Jesus does the unthinkable. Please listen. He does the unthinkable. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. He touches the person who has a contagious disease and who, according to the law of Moses, would transfer the impurity to him, to Christ. No Hebrew priest, no healthy person would ever touch a leper. What they would want is they would want to keep them at a distance, so that there was no possibility of them catching the disease themselves. And Jesus touches the man who everybody else held at a distance. He touches the man and he says, "I do will it be made clean." Now this is what I'd like for you to use your imagination for just a minute or two. Imagine that you have no fingers. And Christ says, "I do will it," and he touches the man, and all of a sudden what? You have fingers. Or you have no toes. And Christ, "I do will it," and your toes are back. Or you have no lips or no nose, or your face is nothing but scabs, or your ears have been eaten away by the disease, and Christ touches you and says, "I do will it." And you have the flesh of a baby. Only God can create flesh. Only God can do that. You can take one finger from one person and put it on another person's hand. I mean, a hand surgeon can do that. But you can't make fingers. You can't make flesh. Only God can create flesh. And that's what happened to this man. He was made new physically. He was physically made new. Jesus orders this man to do something which is really difficult. Don't tell anybody. What would you do? He says, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. And then he gives the man another command. And Jesus says, go and show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses prescribed. This is very interesting too, just for a minute or two for me to tell it to you. It was required by the law of Moses that if you had a man who had leprosy, and supposedly, allegedly, they were cured, but before they could re-enter healthy society, they had to go to the Hebrew priest, and the Hebrew priest had to examine them and then to perform a series of rituals or rites before they could enter the society again. And so this is Jesus telling these people to comply with the Mosaic law. This is what was required. If you'd like to read about it, you can go to the book of Leviticus, chapters 13 and 14. Leviticus 13 and 14, and it will tell you what a person had to do before they could re-enter society if they had leprosy. I'll just tell you one of the things. There's a long list, but I'll just tell you one. It's very interesting. They take 2 doves, or 2 pigeons. They take 2 birds. And one of them they'd split open, and they'd take its blood and they'd put it in a bowl. Then what they would do is I think the bowl was filled with water. They had a bowl filled with water, and they take the blood of one bird and they put it into the water in the bowl. Then they take a branch, I think it was of hyssop. They would take a hyssop branch and they would put it into the blood in the water, and they'd sprinkle the person. They would sprinkle the person with the blood. And then they'd take the other bird and they'd let it go free. They'd let it go free. And the idea is that the leprosy or the disease was transferred to the bird who flies away. And so now this person is free. They have undergone this ritual and they can re-enter the society. But Christ touches the person who everybody kept at a distance. One final thought. Do you have any lepers in your own life? Do you have people in your own life who you keep at a distance, who you want nothing to do with, who you don't want to touch? Figuratively speaking, you just want to watch from a distance. In society, in modern society, I think that certainly is the case. Sometimes it's people of the other political party. Sometimes it's people with a particular disease. It can be anything. It can be somebody who you had a disagreement with 30 years ago and you don't want anything to do with. It can be lots of things. But it's interesting to look at your own life and in our own society, whether there are people who have leprosy, and perhaps we can make an attempt over the next year to do as Christ did, which is to heal the relationship, Amen.